The topic we want to think about now is, does the size of the local church matter? Does the size of the congregation matter? Matt, you pastor, what, 7,000 people?
Bigger than that.
Yeah, it's actually much larger than that.
14,000?
No, not twice.
10.
But yeah, about 10 or 11.
Now, when you say that, I mean, we say that with slight smiles on our faces, but that's an awesome responsibility.
Yeah, it can be crushing if you're not very willing to empower other people, to empower other people, to empower other people.
So what does it mean when you're pastoring a local congregation? We're not talking about a denomination.
Sure.
3 times the size of Pentecost. I mean,
what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, how do you, Hebrews 13:17, that thought
Sure.
of sort of giving account to God.
Well, I think that goes back to making sure you're very clear in regards to membership expectations, what can be expected from you as pastors and elders, what's expected of them, what they can expect in regards to shepherding. That it makes the front door, I believe, a bit more narrow. In that here's where if you're going to join the village church, you're going to know, here's where we stand theologically, here's open hand, here's close hand, but even on our open hand, we're going to want you to line up pretty close before we're willing to say you're members, because we're not quite sure why you would join the church if you don't land where we land on what might even be secondary issues.
Now, how many churches are a part of the village church?
3.
Okay, and of those churches, how many services do they have?
All in all, we have 12.
Okay, so there are about 12 assemblies.
Yes.
That would make up the village church.
Yes.
Okay. Kevin, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that's a very big church. I mean, I got to preach most of the year to see that many people.
So let me do this. Let me ask you guys questions. But before I get dogpiled on here for being faithful.
Neither Kevin nor I dogpiled.
Before I get beat up for being faithful. So here would be a concern I would love for us to discuss. I think one of the things that when people talk about the Gospel Coalition, or when people talk about those of us who would have a Reformed soteriology, I think that if you got up high enough to kind of look at all of evangelicalism, I think what you find, I know what I hear quite often, is that if you're Reformed in your soteriology in particularly, you're not really about mission, you're not really about evangelist, and then they'll point to ultimately the church size as of the Reformed community as an example of, if you've got such good truth and you are so concerned with the person and work of Jesus, why is it that simultaneously your churches are smaller than churches that tend to appear to, and you both know where I stand theologically, but appear to be much more serious about seeing people come to know Jesus Christ. And so I know I always, as long as they'll let me do it, I always do it. If I'm at a conference that is predominantly not in the Reformed stream, I tend to always joke that, hey, I know I'm here. I'm not here because I'm faithful to the word. I'm here because the church grew like it did. If I would have killed it by being faithful, I wouldn't be. Nobody would be like, hey man, can you come teach us how to faithfully
kill the church?
Yeah, crash the church into the ground. And so what would be kind of a response? Not kind of. What would be a good response to those who would say or point to really the lack of size among Reformed churches as an argument against Reformed theology being missional and evangelistic and the like?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, we've talked about this before, and I think we agree on what the dangers are. That on the one hand, just to say bigger is better is not right. We all know big churches that, from our vantage point, don't look to be preaching the gospel very faithfully or be ministering in the way that Christ would want us to minister to his church. But we also don't want to say that bigger is automatically badder. I mean, that those churches are somehow automatically, they must have sold out. So I think you see both of those, right? I mean, here's a really big church. You must be really great. God loves you. God blesses you. And then you got the other folks who say, we're so glad that we're a part of the tiniest family of God, and we just have, 35 people here, and we sure must be really, really right on truth.
So is big church, small church, can we talk some about leadership capacity of the given individual and how God how God gifts different guys, different seasons, different ways?
I think there's so many variables. I mean, I'll admit, I'm a sinner. I want to be successful. And certainly...
There's nothing sinful about you wanting to be successful, necessarily.
Necessarily.
Okay.
But I'm cautioned by David, I was reading that this morning, counting the census, and it's not a one-to-one correlation, but I don't want to be that guy with my church. Just, Lord, look how many people I have here. Mm-hmm. And yet, as you're saying, there is a right kind of ambition, a desire to see growth numerically. Numbers stand for people, so we're not afraid to say, here's numbers. It's when that becomes the all-encompassing, all-consuming focus. And as your question, why would Reformed churches? I just think it's hard to say whether the premise of the question is true. You have to answer, what is a Reformed church? What is big? Are we looking here? Are we looking what city, what country, what time period?
One thing I think we could get agreement on pretty quickly is that I don't think any of us would say, would we, that there is a definitional size that's too big, though for a guy's capacity and other things, a church may be too big, may have gotten there a bad way. But just purely on the basis of size, we wouldn't want to say there's something that's wrong. 500 is too many. 5,000 is too many. On the other hand, I don't think we're going to associate virtue with smallness. I remember one time being with a friend who was referring derisively to Westminster Chapel under Lloyd Jones' ministry and saying, oh, that was more than 100 people. That was just a preaching point. It wasn't a church. It was just a preaching point. Well, I don't think either one of us are going to associate house church smallness with necessary virtue, or Pentecost size largeness with necessary virtue.
Do you think in young men in particular that have a theological robustness, there seems to be a lack of, I'm trying to find the right term, gospel ambition, a belief that it's been my experience. It's a very frustrating reality to see guys with a real robust understanding of the scriptures, but do view exponential growth or rapid growth to be some sort of picture of selling out, almost fear of...
But I think you have to realize how exceptional it is.
No, I don't think it's normative at all.
Yeah,
but I don't think guys should be afraid of it. And it feels like that for a lot of guys that, again, are theologically robust, there's this, oh man, if that happens, then I'm going to be viewed as a sellout, or I'm going to be... And I don't know what we can do to correct that, but I find it to be a bit heartbreaking.
Well, maybe to you, because you've experienced exponential growth. But I mean, Kevin and I, at least so far, we haven't had to deal with that cross and bear that cross. I mean, we're just faithfully going along in ministry, and I think we've both seen grace in our congregations. So I think you're in a very unusual position, and you've been blessed of God in it.
Yeah.
And I think the root problem of that is a lot more common than just dealing with somebody who's in your very unusual situation. It's how we view things with the eyes of the flesh.
Yeah.
Right.
It's looking at things not as God does, but just by what immediately appears to us.
Don't you think, because a lot of pastors may be watching this, and most pastors would have smaller congregations than all of ours. I mean, you're close to over 1,000, 500 or 600. You're a city, 10,000
It's a village.
people. It's a village.
Oh, I see what you did there.
Village.
Now, are you guys still doing multi-site down in the basement?
Please.
I'm asking. I just want to know. Did you make the space for? Okay.
No. You can start rumors.
Projecting it on a bed sheet.
I just didn't know. I didn't know.
Go, Kevin.
But don't you think the pastor that's wrestling with this, and this comes, it feels like the big church pastor, the conference pastor, there's maybe two things we would want to say humbly, because we would want to say to ourselves. One would be, look, as you talk about the flesh, we all have to examine our hearts. I mean, you can be a very poor man and be greedy, and you can be a very rich man and be greedy. You can be proud in a million different ways. So that's the first thing. But second, I think why some men do begin to wear smallness as a badge of honor, because they're hanging on, some of these brothers, in ministry. And we may not even, any of us, be able to sympathize completely
Yeah.
with that. That sense that I am doing the best I know how to do. I'm trying to take classes. I'm going to conferences. I'm trying to preach. I'm trying to love people. And we're at 125, and then we went to 115, then we went to 130, and that was great. Homeschool family came, and then, we were going up and down. And you just want those brothers to feel loved and encouraged and know that there's so many factors of gifting and community and other churches in town and what part of the country and what part of the world that we just want to be careful and just tell people, keep your hand to the plow.
Don Carson's book on his dad.
Yeah, it's
beautiful.
Ordinary pastor, wonderful account of a faithful pastorate like that.
It's good.
Mark, did you have, you talk about your church is still a good size. Were there a number of years where there's very little growth or negative growth, and did you, maybe you're just more confident than the average pastor, but did you wrestle with any of these things?
I think that's fair to say, for the record.
I went there, and there were about 130 people attending, and I did have an older member observe to me after I'd been there about 3 or 4 years. She came up to me after the evening service one Sunday and said, Pastor, it's interesting, because they'd had a new pastor about every 5 years for about 40
Do you want to tell Matt
45
what an
years.
evening service is?
Matt's
My
visited.
grandmother's church had an evening service.
Matt's visited once. I've explained it to him. But she came up to me and she said, Pastor, you're not like the other pastors we've had. When we had new pastors in the past, we would always get a lot of new people start coming, But then she did say, but then they would tend to, drift off. And she said, what we found in the 3 or 4 years, I can't remember how long it was, you've been here, we've had a few people joining, but kind of like all the time. So just kind of slow, steady growth. So I'd say we've just had slow, steady growth for 18 years now.
Well, and I can speak for exponential growth, that it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
That what you want, I think, for healthy growth is kind of steady, slow growth.
We can't plan these things anyway.
No, absolutely.
What we want is faithfulness. And Matt, if God gives Village Church this extraordinary Book of Acts kind of growth, we want to trust His Spirit is going to provide the gifts.
Sure.
For you and the other brothers who are pastoring that church to be able to lead that in an edifying way.
And Matt, talk about, because we're kidding a little bit, but it is a serious responsibility.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. Exponential growth is got to be a huge headache. And I think some people, they might think, well, Matt Chandler, 10,000 people church, celebrity pastor, that whole meme. But it's not like you're putting flyers on the windshield of other churches. You have people coming to your church, and I'm sure you wrestle with it. You don't just, sorry, go away. They're just coming.
That's CHBC. Sorry, Dad, I'm sorry.
Wow. Grandmother's
Full.
church.
We're full. Sorry.
We'll plant a church.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
We've got to
plant a
work with
church,
other
actually.
churches.
Yeah, that's great.
He just calls them campuses or sites. Call them other
Do we want to
churches.
do this now? Or
Keep going.
We can do it
No,
after.
so explain.
So we literally have never, we don't do mailers, we don't do any of those things. There's nothing flashy about what the Village does.
So your growth comes by word of mouth.
It has all come by word of mouth. It's come by conversion, new life that has really created momentum and energy, and then our engagement of our community, whether that be organizationally as a church or organically through people who've had their lives changed by the gospel and are in our community, whether that be the schools or the city governments or on and on I could go, has been so impactful that there's this kind of refrain in our area about A, our seriousness about God, and B, about what God is doing in the lives of people, whether that's restoration in marriage, whether that's freedom from some sort of bondage or conversion itself. All these kind of stories echo out in the community. And so when tragedy strikes, when loneliness befalls the heart, they tend to just be drawn in. And we've got a beautiful culture of a phrase you'll hear repeatedly at the Village is, it's okay to not be okay. It's just not okay to stay there.
Matt was preaching in our church a few weeks ago. He used this great image of, I'll know you'll believe the gospel. You are believing the gospel I've been preaching when I hear you confessing your sins to one another.
Yeah.
It's just a great way to capture it.
And
So, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, so what we've tried to do as best we can is, again, scrunch that front door so we really know what's coming in, as opposed to going, oh, we've got to figure out a way to let them become members more quickly so that we can assimilate, which is a digestive term, these people. So instead we want to scrunch the door a little bit, and we want to know you, we want to know your story, we want you to understand what we believe, we want you to be known at a level before we're responsible.
And just getting to the heart issue again, I mean, one thing I've learned from you, Mark, how you shape your congregational prayers, and you make a very explicit point to pray for other churches in the community, which is a wonderful example, other gospel preaching evangelical churches, and that just sends such a great signal that we're not the only church here. There are other good churches, brothers and sisters there, and I think that's, I always say, you're not a mature Christian until you can root for other Christians. Yes. And that can be really hard for pastors. If you're praying for revival in your city, you don't really want to see revival unless you're okay that it starts at the Baptist church first or the Presbyterian church first.
Yeah, I think Tim Keller has a great article in Church Size that...
Yeah. In my computer, it's just called Keller Points, so I don't know exactly
Tim
what
Keller,
it is.
Church Size,
Google
an
it,
article where he talks about the different sizes a congregation goes through. I love praying for churches, especially of other denominations, Fourth Presbyterian, Falls Church Anglican, nationally for your Cornerstone Evangelical Free Church. I love doing that. It sends all the right signals. It's true. I want to pray for God's blessings on these and other congregations. And I think that we just want to realize the fact that particular people may have a hard time as our church changes size. Mm-hmm. And I've had loving conversations with members of the congregation saying, well, listen, for what you're requiring from me as a senior pastor, you might want to go to another size church,
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, no, it's a good conversation to have sometimes in love. And I think we better quit. We've said a lot on this.
Okay,
we've talked
they can,
a long time
sure.
in church size.
Thank you.